and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show right here on the internet. And well, as you can see behind me, we've switched over to fall. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about fall and also a little bit about Christmas. But first, let me talk about where you can find us. Of course, you can find us at bobsmarket.com. But you can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Bob's Market. Well, this week, I headed uptown this morning to take a look where we're starting to put out our poinsettias for Christmas. So right now we've got them in pots and they're kind of spacing them out into the greenhouse for their final bit of growth that they need to do going into fall and to get them ready to sell kind of around Thanksgiving and going into December. So let's take a look at some poinsettias. This morning I am here at our uptown greenhouse where it's starting to look a little bit like Christmas. We're starting to put poinsettias out on the floor. They've been transplanted and now they're starting to grow into their finished size. So let's head over and take a look at that. So just like with the mums, we water the poinsettias with drip tubing. And every one of them has to be placed directly underneath the dripper. So an important part of getting a nice big bushy poinsettia is trimming. And you can see right here where this one has been trimmed. So all of these have been trimmed by hand in the last few weeks. So eventually this entire greenhouse will be filled with poinsettias. The color change of poinsettias is dependent on day length. So as the days start to get shorter, that'll trigger them to start to change color. Alright, so that's a little Christmas cheer for your September. The other video that I have for this week deals with the meadow garden at my house, and it's something that I've done different segments throughout the summer on. But what I did this past weekend is I worked on partially, I'm kind of breaking it up over the course of a few weeks, but I'm working on getting it ready for fall and winter. And I'm doing all of that in preparation for next year. So something that I'll talk about in the video, and I'll discuss it a little bit more afterwards, is how I'm planning out my meadow garden. And this is something that I came up with, and I think it's a pretty awesome trick that you might be able to use in your own landscape. So let's take a look at what's happening over in the meadow garden. Alright, so it is Saturday and I'm getting ready to do a little bit of a project in the meadow garden. And what I'm doing is mowing it down for fall. So I'm not doing it all at once. I'm kind of breaking it up into sections, and that way I can do a little bit at a time. So I did one section last week, and I'm getting ready to do a section this week. But something that I recently did is I took a screenshot from Google Maps, and that way I was able to draw on it and come up with kind of a plan for next year. So that's going to tell me which areas I need to till up, what I'm going to plant where, and so on. So this is something that you can do for your own landscape. Jump onto Google Maps, set it to satellite view so you can see, the buildings and everything, and then take a screenshot and print it off. And then all that I did was use some colored markers to draw out my plans. And the cool thing is I made multiple copies, and I can kind of sit down and come up with multiple versions and then pick the version that I want to go with. So right now my meadow garden kind of back here on the back side is really square, and I kind of want to make a more organic shape, which down this side I'm dealing with the property line, so of course that side's going to be kind of straight. But back here I'm going to shoot for making kind of this nice arc shape, but then I've got this little triangular section, and it looks like it might not make sense, but my plan for the future is to put a gazebo back here in the back corner of our property. So my plan is to eventually have this bed kind of extending out and around the gazebo. So this kind of gets me started in that direction. So let's head over to the meadow garden and take a look. So directly behind me here is the section that I mowed down last week. And what this does is, I only do it like every other year for these grassy areas. But what it does is it lets the clippings kind of mulch in place, and it really helps to revitalize the area. So next year, I'll probably end up with even thicker growth. The area that I'm going to be mowing today is this area directly behind me, and I do have a tree sapling over here that I want to protect, so I've marked it with a stake so that way I know not to mow over it. Alright, so I just finished mowing off this section. Part of the plan that I have for this area is to till up a couple sections here in the front and plant cosmos or something like that that's going to get taller to create a little bit of privacy in the back of the garden. Eventually I plan to plant some trees that'll kind of create a screen. But until then, I can do it with something that's cheaper that I can plant from seed. So I have one more grassy area to mow, and then also the wildflower patch that I did this year. And next year, I'm planning on expanding that patch over into this section, but also about right here in this area, I'm going to extend out a new path that goes over this way. And I have a specific plan in mind for that. So I'm going to have the path lead to right about here, and this is where I'm going to move my little wooden platform to. And what I plan to do is plant cosmos around it, and then plant zinnias on the outside of that. And it'll create kind of a secret little private area here in the garden. Because as we've seen with the wildflowers this year, cosmos gets pretty tall. So I think it'll act as a perfect screen. And then out around it, we'll kind of have this big blob of just general wildflowers. As I said, cosmos gets pretty tall. So this is the cosmos that I planted this year. And I'm down at about setting height for that platform. So being completely surrounded by this, I think will be pretty interesting. So here in the wildflower section, I had cut out some pokeberries that came up earlier in the year. These popped up a little bit later, but I'm actually going to leave them because they are native to this area, and also birds really like the berries. However, keep in mind that pokeberries are toxic to humans, and I mean, you know, enough of them, they will kill you. So don't eat pokeberries. Yeah, it gives me kind of like a Hunger Games vibe. Another plant that came up right here in this area is the sumac. And again, it's native to this area, so I'm going to leave it and just see what happens with it. The zinnias, they're starting to look a little worse for the wear. Of course, they're going to be mowed down. I'm probably going to collect some more seeds from them. But also, we've got all these other plants that I'm going to be mowing down this fall. And what that'll do is it'll help distribute the seeds. So next spring, hopefully a lot of these seeds will re-sprout. To kind of cover my bases though and have some insurance, I did save some of this seed that I used, and then I'm also going to be purchasing more seed to add in with this. Which, as it dies back, it doesn't look half bad. I mean, it does create some textural interest here in the garden. So long term with this section, it was kind of another experimental year this year, but I think it did help me further develop a plan going forward. And the next things that I want to start adding to my meadow here is some structures. So right here where the entryway to the path is from the house, I do want to add kind of an arbor or an archway or something like that right here where I could plant some vines that'll vine up over it to create kind of an inviting entryway. And then also further in here, of course, we've got the apple tree. It's doing great. Hopefully next year start to see some fruit on it. I do have my cherry tree over here that's just barely hanging on. If you follow Bob's Live, you know it got wrecked this year by the ice storm. But I also have a couple volunteer trees that have come up. So right here where I mowed today, I put a little green stake, and that's because I have a little maple sapling that's come up right here. So I'm going to let it grow and see what happens with it. And then likewise over this way, over toward the cherry tree, I have another volunteer maple that I'm going to leave. Anytime I can get trees and plants like the sumac, the pokeberry, that are native to this area, I want to kind of favor those over something that I've planted like this apple tree. So of course my long-term plan is to incorporate more fruit trees, but I want to kind of work that around anything that comes up naturally. But you know, this is still a process, and I'm just getting started with it. So well, this might be the last update that I do on the meadow garden this year, because we're moving into fall. It's going to get pretty boring out here. Throughout the winter time, I do want to start tilling up areas to get them ready for spring planting. So I might kind of October, November, that time period, start working on some early tilling, and that way it can kill the grass back and help get it ready for more tilling in the springtime. So that's what's happening in the fall in my meadow garden. And during the video, Patty commented and said, "Boy, you've got a lot of property." Um, yeah, we've got, I think it's 1.5 acres, so it's not a huge amount. I mean, I grew up on a 25-acre farm, so for me, it's a pretty small lot. Uh, but down on that end of the property, past the garage, yeah, it is a big section right there. And for me, with mowing the entire lot when we first bought the property, I was spending 2.5, sometimes 3 to 4 hours, depending on how much weed eating I needed to do, on the lawn every week. And initially, I created that meadow section mainly just to eliminate some mowing. I wanted to save some time, and it shaves about a half hour off of mowing the lawn because I'm not down there in the lower end just going in circles for a half hour. Um, but then I started experimenting with adding in wildflowers and different things like that. So my goal is to eventually kind of repopulate the entire area with native plants, because those grasses in that area are field grasses. So it's stuff that more or less are invasive. You know, they were brought in hundreds of years ago by our ancestors to be grown for hay crops. And it's not native to this region. So it looks good right now when it grows up and it's got the nice tassels on it and everything. But I want to get back to something that's more native to an area right along the Ohio River, which is where my house is located. Um, so I'm looking at a few different seed companies that specialize in native seeds for this area. And then I'm also wanting to mix in wildflowers and things like that. So my plan, and I've got it here, um, which it looks like my video has frozen. um, okay, let me try. Yeah. So I had this problem last week, and I don't think I'm going to be able to fix it. Bummer. Technical difficulties here. There we go. Okay. I had to shut down and restart the camera, but now we seem to be working. So I think I'm going to have to go in and fiddle with some settings. um, all right. So if anybody is still watching, probably, yeah, I've got 2 people watching now. Everybody's like, oh, the video's broken. Bye. um, so what I did is I got on Google Maps and printed off a screenshot of the area. Which for me, this looks weird because it's flipped to the reverse of how it is on my property. But this is the garage next to my house, and then this whole area is the meadow. And our property does extend back this way more. I just happened to not take a very big screenshot. And when people are driving by, there's kind of a main road out here. So when people are driving by, this is kind of the main view that they have. So I kind of think about what they're seeing, but then also back here on the backside, I want to create more private areas. So this is the new path that I'm going to add. And then I'm going to have the little wooden seating area with the cosmos and zinnias around that, and then kind of a larger blob of wildflowers. And then I'm actually planning on doing 2 large plantings of buckwheat next year. And then the rest of this area is going to be grass. I want to add in a few more trees. Where I had the wood seating area this year, I'm planning on either building or purchasing a little bench, like a park bench, to put there. I'm going to do a little planting around it. But these paths, one cuts through over to the other side of my property, kind of at the front corner. And then the other one kind of cuts back to the back side of my garden. So, like right over in this area is my vegetable garden. But back in this area, I have like a large square of grass that I left. And what I would like to do is put like a gazebo or something back there, because it's the corner of our property that is kind of the furthest from our house. And it's also the furthest from our neighbors. So it kind of makes it the most private area of the property. So I think it would be kind of cool to have a gazebo or something back there that's kind of a little private retreat. Because, with a 1.5 acre lot, myself and all of our neighbors, we don't really have any fences between us. We just kind of overlap whenever we mow. And without trees or anything like that, there's nothing really creating privacy in the backyard. So this is a very early plan. So, I'm like 3 years into the Meadow Garden project, and this is going to take probably decades to develop and finish, because I'm just doing it slowly over time and kind of letting it evolve. So last year I did an experiment with a little section of wildflowers out in the front of the meadow. This year I expanded it a little bit bigger. Next year I'm going to expand again. And each time is an experiment, and I'm kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't and adjusting it from there. And I'm also doing tons of research in the meantime. So I'm watching videos online. There's a dude on TikTok. I need to look him up. But he's more southern in the U.S., so it's a different zone. So a lot of it doesn't cross over. But he works for his state's DNR, and he specializes like in native plants. So I've been following his videos and learning a lot from him. But then, let me grab here off to the side. There are tons of great books out there too. And yeah, some of these are green, so where I've got a green screen background, they're showing up as invisible. Well, this one, it's not really I guess it is sort of educational, but it's The Unsettling of America by Wendell Berry. He is a great author on farming and conservation. But both of these are more along the lines of planning a meadow garden. This one is Planting the Natural Garden. So it's a great book. And the front of it is like, right now I'm kind of mowing down my meadow, but they've got kind of a nice fall scene there on the front of that book. And then this one is Planting in a Post-Wild World. So both of these are great books. And I forget which one it is. I think it's this one. Yeah, this book, it's got a lot of really like helpful charts and a lot of helpful guides to kind of help you plan out the different layers in your garden and how to organize them. Because you have to think about like the trees and the shrubs, and then all your understory plants, and how to plan that out. And I'm kind of building it in reverse. I'm starting with the understory, and then I'm slowly adding in bushes and trees. Uh, which you might have noticed in that video. One of the things that I didn't mention was the butterfly bush, and that's because the field mice evidently love butterfly bushes, and I should have kept it, weed eated out around it until it got itself established, but they ate all the bark around the bottom of the stems and killed the poor thing. So, yeah. Well, I have reached that time in our live episode where I am just sitting here rambling, and at least I haven't froze up yet. But that is all that I have for this week. So until next time, keep growing.